I apologize if my voice is still a little bit sickly. I've been getting over this cold for a while. I don't know if it was a cold or a sinus infection or what. I don't know when this video is coming out. I recorded a couple of videos yesterday, and near the end of one of the videos my voice was starting to get really hoarse, but I don't know if I'm actually posting up that video or if I'm going to remake that video because I ended up talking for 2 hours straight. And I kind of don't feel like trying to edit down 2 hours of footage. I think I might just redo it and just do a better job. This is a new channel and everything. I don't plan on going out and buying a ton of books all the time or anything like that. But if I ever get like a book haul, or maybe like every once in a while, I'd like to do like an update on that because I love new books. And I'll probably do the same thing with movies. I think I buy movies more often than I buy books. I love physical books, and sometimes I'll read ebooks. And a lot of times, since I can listen to audiobooks where I work, because I work in a factory where I just kind of like, I work on a laser that cuts stuff. So I can just listen to audiobooks throughout my entire shift. So a lot of times I do that. So yeah, I like to go through a lot of the books that I got in like the last like month or so of the year. Right now it's the 30th of December 2023 where I'm recording it right now. I don't know when I'm actually putting this out. I don't know when I'm actually creating my channel. So hopefully you guys like this. There's like 3 instances in these past couple months that I bought like a pile of books, and then I'll also go over what I got for Christmas. I'm still working out the kinks of like camera setup. For right now, it's kind of like in the corner of my room, and my room is a fucking mess right now. Can you actually see all the... Okay, good. That's out of shot. Lighting sucks. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get better at it. I end up always recording these things at nighttime when there's no natural light coming through my window. So a lot of these books I haven't read before, and I bought them because I've been wanting to read them for a long time. Actually, before I get into books I got, let me talk about some books I'm borrowing. First one is Bunny by Mona Awad. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce the last name. I wanted to read this because, and you'll see a theme. There's a lot of like witch books. I went on some forums looking for novels that are based off of old style witches, like the satanic, Puritan, Salem witch trials type witches, you know, baby sacrificing type witches. This is one a lot of people recommended. I don't know if it's really that type of witch or anything, but it did look really interesting enough that I wanted to read it. So I was luckily able to borrow that, so I'd like to read that soon. So Bunny, it's a university student that sees this clique of rich girls, and they all call each other Bunny. And then this character ends up getting an invitation to one of their gatherings or something like that, and she ends up finding like they're into like this weird shit and stuff like that. I think I heard that like these people like to use witchcraft to turn boys into animals or vice versa. Yeah, so it sounds really cool, sounds really interesting. And like when I said I wanted like the Salem Witch Trials type witches, I didn't mean like it had to be in Salem Witch Trial era, but like that style of witch, if that makes sense. So that kind of sounds like they might be a little bit more of like the ritualistic Satanist type witch that I was looking for. Even if not, it sounds like an interesting enough book that I just want to read it anyway. And then same person also threw this in there. I hadn't heard of it. I think they had actually talked to me about it before. Sisters is about sisters named Julie and September, and they move across country to an old family house that apparently has like quite a bit of history on its own, and weird shit happens. It sounds like noises come from the walls, lights flicker on their own accord, sleep feels impossible, and dreams are endless. The bond of like the two sisters starts getting challenged in some way, form, or fashion. I think it's a horror novel, I'm pretty sure, because I looked it up on Goodreads and Storygraph, and it does sound really cool, so, and it has a really sick cover, so I'm glad that I'm borrowing this. Can't wait to read that, check that out. So this has been on my to read for a while. V.C. Andrews' Flowers in the Attic. Now the funny thing about this is I was always under the impression that this was a horror novel. When I was in the bookstore trying to look for it, I looked in the horror section and I saw other stuff by V.C. Andrews, but I didn't find this. I was like, oh, like, what the heck? And then just on a whim, I ended up looking in the regular fiction section, and there it was. I remember actually, I was telling the cashier about it. There's this young woman that was cashing me out, and I was like, yeah, I looked in the horror section, it wasn't there, and then I found it in like the regular fiction section. I was all afraid it wasn't in there, and then one of the other workers had me walking by, and he stopped. He's like, I applaud you so much for looking for it for thinking to look in the horror section first. And I'm like, is that not what other people do? Like, I was confused. So I don't know. I think looking it up, it's like more of like a Southern Gothic with like horror undertones, maybe, but I don't know. I'm pretty sure the movie adaptation is considered horror. But yeah, it's like about like this family, for the sake of getting inheritance, they'll ensure their future. They keep their children hidden away out of sight, like locked in the attic, and as if they never existed. Their mother's like, oh, it'll just be for a little while. They realize that like their survival and well-being is kind of starting to get a little iffy. And I guess the grandmother's cruel and superstitious. It's the first book in a series about this family. Back says psychological suspense, so I guess maybe it's like a suspense novel, I don't know. I have heard like there's like domestic abuse in this novel. There's like incest and other weird fucked up shit. And there was a while there I wasn't sure if I ever wanted to read it, knowing about that. And but I'm really curious, and also I really like this cover especially. But I walked into the bookstore knowing that I wanted that. I just turned to a page and it said something about diarrhea. I will never find that page ever again. Do you ever love doing that? Just flipping through like random like pages, and it's like, oh wow, kiss, 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 finger his hair, stroke his chin, stuff like that. Definitely a controversial book, and I'm excited to see what makes it so controversial, and if it is a good book after all. Here's a book that I have read. It's actually a book that I kind of have some, or at the time I had some mixed feelings about, and I'm really excited to reread it to see, now that I'm older, you know, if I have a different perspective on it. Because I think I first read it back in like either middle school or high school. I think it was high school. And I hadn't read a lot of like older stuff at that time, and now that I've read a lot more classics, I'm a huge fan of Edgar Allan Poe and stuff like that. I'm really curious to see if like that will give me a better perspective on it. But it's also a sick edition. It is the cloth-bound hardcover of Dracula by Bram Stoker. So when I first read this novel, I did really like the way that Bram Stoker worded his prose, I guess. And especially, like, I thought his character development and describing was phenomenal. But I remember thinking that it feels like not a lot happens throughout the book. And the thing that really ruined it for me was the ending was so anticlimactic. At the same time, the 1930s Dracula movie with Bela Lugosi is a really faithful adaptation, and it's also pretty anticlimactic, and yet I love it. If I reread it knowing kind of how it ends, maybe I'll be able to appreciate the rest of it, because I just remember at the time that ending was just like, all of that for that, and it just pissed me off. I can't wait to reread it at some point, and it's still cool to have like a cloth-bound version of it. I still liked the novel. I think I still gave it like a 3 out of 5. And it was one of those things like I wanted to give it more, especially because of its cultural significance, but I also kind of wanted to give it less. Can't wait to reread it, see how my opinions change. And then the next book is another classic that I can't wait to read. We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson, and I love this cover as well. And it's a thin little book, little novella. I can't wait. I can probably like read this in a sitting if I really want to, if I really sit down and focus, but I'm patient. I'll just read out loud what this says inside. My name is Mary Catherine Blackwood. I am 18 years old, and I live with my sister Constance. I have often thought that with any luck at all I could have been born a werewolf, because the 2 middle fingers on both my hands are the same length, but I have had to be content with what I had. I dislike washing myself and dogs and noise. I like my sister Constance and Richard Plantagenet and Amanita phalloides. The death cap mushroom. Okay, I was about to say that sounds like a scientific name for something. I actually thought it was somebody else's name, and then okay. Everyone else in my family is dead. You will be wondering about that sugar bowl, I imagine. Is it still in use? You are wondering, has it been cleaned? You may very well ask, was it thoroughly washed? And as I understand it, from what I've heard, it's like, yeah, this family that lives in a castle, and like the main character is like accused for like potentially killing her family or something like that. I really don't know a heck of a lot about it other than that, but I know Shirley Jackson wrote The Haunting of Hill House, which is a phenomenal book. I think it's a 5 out of 5 star book in my opinion. It's definitely one of my favorite haunted house stories of all time. There's just so much great stuff about that. So I'm really excited to read something else by Shirley Jackson. Here's a short story collection, 20th Century Ghosts by Joe Hill. Pretty sure this has... It's got the black phone in it, so I really want to read that so I can watch the movie. I actually was going to watch the movie anyway, but then I never actually got around to it. I don't know why. Got a kind of cool cover. It's a little bit simplistic. Really excited to read this. I love Joe Hill. He is Stephen King's son, if you don't know. And he wrote, he's written novels such as The Heart-Shaped Box, which is one of the ones I really need to read. He's written Nosferatu, which is phenomenal. And he's written Horns, which is one of my favorite books. I don't know when this video is coming out, but I recently recorded my top favorite books that I read this last year, and Horns was the #1, so I highly recommend Horns. Such a fucking good novel. Joe Hill is a phenomenal writer. So I got those first 4 books in like one bookstore. These next 4 books I bought at a different time all at once as well. First one is this really cool edition. It's The Great God Pan by Arthur Machen. Or Machen? I don't know how to... I'm so bad at pronouncing people's last names. Now, I actually have read The Great God Pan, but I have not read any of the other short stories that are in this. For one thing, there's a short story called Witchcraft. And with my whole like witch thing going on here, that sounds really cool. There's a short story called Midsummer, which I kind of have to wonder if it has any influence on the movie Midsummer, because The Great God Pan is like a folk horror story, and I feel like Midsummer, or pretty much any folk horror that had come after this, I feel like is probably in some way influenced by it, because it's so iconic. And then there's the short story The White People, which is really famous, that I really want to read. But Great God Pan, I read that a few years ago. I remember really loving it. It's due for a reread, so that's why I set out to buy an edition of it. And this is just a beautiful edition. It's by the Oxford University Press. I'm trying to remember exactly what the story was about. It's kind of like... I don't know, it's about like a pagan rituals and a pagan god, and there's like blood orgies and shit. It's fucked up and it's awesome. So, yeah. Here's a book that I've just been hearing a lot of people, not just like people that I know that really highly recommended it to me, but also like a lot of the booktubers that I follow and other people online just recently seem to have been like raving about this again. I had never heard of it before, because I guess I had like this big surgence of popularity a while ago, but it's like seems to be getting like a resurgence, at least in like some circles. But so I was really curious. I looked it up and I thought it sounded really good. Got this edition of Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. On the back, this is how it explains it. In one of the most acclaimed novels of recent years, Kazuo Ishiguro imagines the lives of a group of students growing up in a darkly skewed version of contemporary England. Narrated by Kathy, now 31, Never Let Me Go dramatizes her attempts to come to terms with her childhood at the seemingly idyllic Hailsham school, and with the fate that has always awaited her and her closest friends in the wider world. Story of love, friendship, and memory, Never Let Me Go is charged throughout with a sense of the fragility of life. Now, actually, what I had heard of what this book is about is a little bit different, and kind of seems to go into more science fiction territories. But when I was talking to somebody about it, they're afraid that I might have been spoiled a little bit on the plot, not like too much. But nevertheless, I don't want to do that to you guys. If there's somebody out there that hasn't read this and is interested in it, I don't want to say it, and then even if it's like a minor spoiler. So I'll keep that to myself. But yeah, I've just heard that it's a very well-written novel and that it's really interesting and really emotional and stuff like that. So I can't wait to read it. Everybody seems to be raving about it. Now here's a non-fiction book. It's the Oxford Illustrated History of Witchcraft and Magic, for my research, by Owen Davies. And it's got a lot of pictures and a lot of dense text. It's basically a textbook. But I've heard a lot of great things about this, and that's why I sought this out. And I really cannot wait. Like, I've definitely heard from a lot of different people that have read this, that this is one of the better source books about witchcraft. And it goes into, like, history of witchcraft in real life and in literature, and, like, the Salem witch trials. And then it also goes more into, like, how it's been in more modern media, and, like, coming up to nowadays, religious significance, and all that kind of stuff like that. So, I mean, like, I'm really... really excited to read it. I love that little skeleton guy in the back. My coffee's already getting warm, or not hot. Have a great day. This next book that I got is another little short story collection. More or less just kind of came across it and I looked it up, and like it's actually like some of these stories were pretty significant in the Gothic movement, I guess, in some ways. So which I'd never really actually heard of them, but they sounded good, so I decided to get it. Gothic Tales by Elizabeth Gaskell. Apparently she was born from 1810 to 1865. Like it tells you that right at the top. She was a Victorian author. There's 9 chilling Gothic stories in this collection. Tales that are collected here are tales that set a precedent for ghost and horror stories of the era. So that's that significance that I was talking about. In The Poor Clare, a young innocent girl named Lucy is haunted by an unrelenting ghost invoked by her aging grandmother. In the novella Lois the Witch, another witch thing, the young Louis sails to America to join her distant family. She is greeted by a New England engulfed in the fever of the Salem witch trials. So, ended up working out perfectly for me. Soon all goes wrong when she is deemed one of the cursed. The reader confronts the peaks of suspense in The Grey Woman, a terrifying psychological thriller. These, among others, shape this well-rounded collection of one of the most respected Victorian authors. Gaskell, however you pronounce it, was championed and published by Charles Dickens in his literary magazine Household Words. Her style, vision, and delivery are seen at its best here in Gothic Tales. And, oh wow, definitely like really small font. One of my favorite types of stories is Gothic stories, especially older Gothic stories. Fucking love them. You know, they're horror, but they kind of got this romantic quality to them, and usually fucked up in some way, form, or fashion. So I'm really excited about that. Speaking of, I'm pretty sure this is a Gothic novel, and this is another one that I got for my witch stuff. Wow, there are some... Sorry, I'm flipping through the pages, and there are some pages that are kind of printed pretty poorly, like super bold, like the ink was too wet or something. Of course, I can't find them now. Oh, wow. Look how... I don't know if that will show up very well, but look how blurry that page is. Like how bad that was printed. Hopefully that shows up on camera. Ugh. That sucks because it's a Penguin Classics book. Yeah, like that is bad if that pops up. I don't know if that's the exact same page that I found or not, but I feel like that's even worse. Wow. Well, anyway, it is The House of the Seven Gables by Nathaniel Hawthorne. And yeah, as you can see, it's a Penguin Classics edition, which I thought were usually supposed to be of really high quality. That was kind of their point, but oh wow. Man, those blurry things really make me feel like I'm not wearing my glasses when I'm reading it. That sucks. I don't know if it's too late, if I can like go back and see if I can, if they have like another copy that I could switch out for. I guess either way, I'm not really too worried about it. It's not like it's every page, there's just some pages here and there. It'll just be a chore to get through those pages. Anyway, classic that I haven't read yet. I've read his Scarlet Letter, and I remember, I read that in high school for class. So that's always a bad representation to talk about, like, certain books, because when you're a kid, especially, or even not as a kid, when you're made to read something and you have to read it before a certain deadline, you're usually not going to care as much about it. You just want to get through it. You don't really care about it. So when I read the Scarlet Letter, I do remember thinking that the writing was very repetitive in some form or fashion, like if he was using like a lot of the same word over and over again or something. And I also I didn't get into it, and I didn't care about it. So I kind of want to reread the Scarlet Letter at some point now that I'm older, just to see if my opinions would change. But this book is definitely more of like a gothic book. This enduring novel of crime and retribution vividly reflects the social and moral values of New England in the 1840s. Nathaniel Hawthorne's gripping psychological drama concerns the Pincian family, a dynasty founded on pious theft, who lived for generations under a dead man's curse until their house is finally exorcised by love. Some sources were saying that this also has to do with witchcraft. But I also just want to read it anyway, because it's supposed to be like a classic gothic book. And, yeah. Sounds like it's up my alley. Hopefully I like it. Kind of disappointed that I found out about the really shitty fucking printing. Speaking of books that I read for class, and so I didn't give a fuck about it at the time. And also I remember just not liking it anyway. But I'm curious, and also fits with my witch stuff. I got The Crucible by Arthur Miller, and this is also a Penguin classic, so let's flip through it and make sure that it's actually printed right. It's printed beautifully. Of course, the book that I want more is printed worse. You know, so this was actually a play, and it was based off of like historical people and real events, like real events of witchcraft and witch hunts that happened during the Salem witch trials. The town accuses this one thing that's like a teenage girl of being a witch, and she's trying to prove that she's not a witch, but nobody wants to listen to her because she's a fucking witch. And I'm pretty sure, if I remember right, the book was supposed to be trying to show how ridiculous the Salem witch trials were, and so like obviously I'm pretty sure like there's no actual witchcraft going on. Everyone's just paranoid, and they want to blame somebody for stuff, and they really believe in witchcraft and stuff like that. And it was actually written in 1953. I think maybe one of the reasons why I just didn't like it was because it's written like a play. I hate reading play scripts and screenwriting scripts as opposed to like regular prose. Not my cup of tea, but I will read it when need be. And it is, I do like the cover, and I like this edition, how it feels. Alright, next thing. So this does have witchcraft in it, so I kind of got it like for that. But I don't think there's a lot of witchcraft in it, so I don't actually really expect to get a lot out of it from that regard. But it's also one of those things that I've been kind of curious. This is another author I've been curious to see if I will like them better now that I'm older and now that I'm more used to like older literature. Macbeth by William Shakespeare. Reading him in high school, I hated it. I didn't understand it. I didn't want to understand it. I understood it to a degree. I also understood that almost every single one of his fucking stories seem to follow the same formula. Like this and Romeo and Juliet and Hamlet, it all starts out with like there's like this external conflict going on. Usually it's war related. Like this is war. I'm pretty sure Hamlet's war. Romeo and Juliet, it's a family war. And then that's like as the backdrop of like the main characters going through stuff. There's usually some supernatural things going on, or people predicting stuff, and then always ends in tragedy. If there's any one of them that I did kind of like, it would have been Macbeth. It's kind of cool. Some of these have like some drawings, because also the way that this is that you got Shakespeare's text, and then you got like things over here that kind of give you some definitions and explanations to help better understand it, because not only is Shakespeare really into like a lot of ornate language and a lot of ornate metaphors and stuff like that, but like it makes it hard for us to read nowadays, since language has transformed so much over the years. Also, apparently back then, I don't know if a lot of people know it, but even back then, a lot of people also didn't really understand Shakespeare, because he kind of just had his own way of like saying stuff, and a lot of people just kind of like went with it, because it's like, we want to be entertained. He's like one of the better playwright people, and even if we don't understand everything that's going on with all the acting and stuff like that, we can fill in the blanks pretty well. So so it's funny to think that like even people back then were like, huh, what did you just say? I don't know, but it sounded pretty, whatever. Really curious to see how I'll like it this time around. This is also a pretty cool edition. I like it. Folger Shakespeare Library, like they always have those translating pages. In the beginning, there's all this stuff about like Shakespeare's life, and you know, how to read Shakespeare's language, and is explaining like his wordplay, and trying to tell you how much of a genius he was, which I'm not saying he wasn't. I'm just saying that maybe he was a little overrated. Maybe not. Probably not. No, like back then, like no. He was definitely one of the best storytellers of his generation. And we do still learn a lot from Shakespeare. So funny thing, even though as a kid or in high school I didn't like his plays and books and stuff like that, I actually always loved his sonnets. So I mean, like, he does have beautiful imagery and words that he and wordplay that he uses. It's just that like when it's in a play form, when it feels like a long ass poem, it just doesn't feel like it fits completely, in my opinion. And of course, like, a lot of that is because the way we view stories and plays has evolved so much from back then. So we got 3 more books. So this one's interesting. So I went on this date, and we did this thing where we went to a bookstore. Both of us went through the books, read like the book blurbs and stuff like that. Tried to find a book that the other person hasn't read, especially if like neither person has even heard of it before and you're just discovering it for the first time there. So we each found a book for each other, kind of blindly, just based on that, reading the book blurbs. We're like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. So I'm reading through this right now, because we're going to read through them and then get back together and talk about them and see if we recommend the books to each other. And this is the one that she picked me. It is called Looking Glass Sound by Catriona Ward. It's got a really cool cover. I am not very far into it, I have to admit. I've been really sick this past week, and I had a lot of brain fog, so I'm only 53 pages in. Kind of starts off a little bit weird, but it is starting to get really good. There's some foreshadowing going on. It's making me really excited to see what's happening. And I'll just read this blurb to you. In a cottage overlooking the windswept Maine coast, Wilder Harlow has begun the last book he will ever write. It is the story about the sun-drenched summer days of his youth in Whistler Bay, and the blood-stained path of the killer that stalked his small vacation town. About the terrible secret he and his companions Nat and Harper discovered entombed in the coves off the bay, and how the pact they swore that day echoed down the decades, forever shaping their lives. But the more Wilder writes, the less he trusts himself in his memory. He starts to see things that can't be real. Notes hidden in the cottage from an old friend now dead, a woman with dark hair drowning in the icy waters below, calling for help, entire chapters he doesn't recall typing, appearing overnight. Who or what is haunting Wilder? No longer able to trust his own eyes, Wilder begins to fear that this will not only be his last book, but the last thing he ever does. Looking Glass Sound is another masterful story from Catriona Ward about friendship and betrayal, dark obsessions, and the impossibility of escaping your own story. So it sounds really sick. It's from the author of The Last House on Needless Street, which I actually haven't read, and I don't know what it's about or anything like that, but I've seen it pop up a lot in, like, recently. I don't know if it's from like ads on Goodreads or Storygraph, or if it's like people that I know that are like talking about it, but yeah. The book that I had chosen for my date was called Mr. Magic. basically about like this kids TV show that ended because of a tragic accident, and ended up being largely forgotten by like the public eye and stuff like that. But then there was like some like cult following that was still dedicated to it, and even though like all of the existing copies of the episodes and stuff like that have been like disappeared or destroyed, they are still holding out hope that they come back, and they can't figure out. There's no evidence of like who directed or produced it or anything like that. There's like this remote desert filming compound that pops up. A lot of these fans like go there, and then like shit happens, I guess, and it just sounds really cool. I can't wait to hear how my date likes it. I might read it either way, even if they don't like it, because I'm really curious. Alright, so the last two books I actually got for Christmas. The first one is an autobiography, and it is Yours Cruelly, Elvira by Cassandra Peterson, otherwise known as Elvira herself. Which is a cool autobiography about her life. Can't wait to read it. I love Elvira. I've always been like a big fan of hers. Been wanting to read this ever since it came out. I've been kind of on the fence of whether I wanted to read the physical copy or if I wanted to listen to the audiobook. I'm pretty sure the audiobook is narrated by Cassandra Peterson herself. I can't remember though, but I ended up just wanting to get the book because I was also like, that'd be a cool collector's piece in my collection. I don't know, like, not that I'm seeing it. Maybe collector's piece is a weird thing, but it's just a good thing to like have in my possession for my film and book collection. Because I have cool editions of both Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, and Elvira's Haunted Hills. You know, I have the Arrow video steelbook of Mistress in the Dark, and then I have the I can't remember if it's 4K. It might be 4K, might not. It's got like the really cool cardboard slipcover, like hard cardboard slipcover, but it's the Shout Factory version of Elvira's Haunted Hills. So she herself is really funny. I'm really into that kind of like gothic vibe of like you know, the way she dresses and stuff like that, and the fact that she made a living introducing horror movies, and I fucking love horror movies, you know. So had to get the autobiography, and I'm glad I got it for Christmas. And speaking of horror movies, I also got this for Christmas. It is a beast, and yeah, The Art of Horror, an illustrated history, edited by Stephen Jones. Forward by John Landis, who is the director of An American Werewolf in London. It's just got a lot of really cool pictures, and I thought it was just going to be pictures of movie posters when I put it on my wish list, but there's actually some full-on articles. There's I don't know what this article is about, talking about like Universal's horror in the after the First World War and stuff like that. Sounds like it might be talking about like how the First World War kind of like shaped like some of the horror movies there, which is something really interesting. Stephen King talks about that sort of stuff in Danse Macabre as well, where you know, because since horror preys off of fears, you usually find a lot after big events like wars and like terrorist events and things like that. There's like usually a huge boom of horror movies that come after that, and a lot of times they use horror as like a vehicle to kind of prey on those kinds of fears that the citizens are feeling and stuff like that. Except for like earlier on, what was it, after World War II, because World War II was a little too horrific. So a lot of people didn't want to go into horror after a while for that. And horror like almost died until color movies came out. It's really interesting. I had seen that there is an article in here about Vincent Price, I believe. Maybe it was about Roger Corman post-cycle and just happened to show a lot of Vincent Price, but either way, I fucking love Vincent Price. I love that man! It's kind of got this like matte sort of cover. It's fucking awesome. I'm so glad I got this. So that's kind of my book haul for the end of 2023. Definitely a little bit to go through. Tell me what you think. That's kind of like a month or two worth of stuff that I got. I'm really happy with it, and I can't wait to read all of those things that I haven't read before and reread all the ones that I have read before. But until next time, see ya.